Hello, I'm Janine Tanner.
And I'm Lauren Tanner.
And together we're
Time Team Tanner.
Welcome to this, our next video on Nottingham's history.
Today we are going to be telling you about Narrow Marsh, which was not a nice place to live 100 years ago.
So Narrow Marsh was a slum district to the south of the centre of Nottingham, and it was to the east of its neighbours Broadmarsh and Middlemarsh. Prior to the 1890s, all three marsh areas were quite joined together, and you had Middlemarsh, which was here, where Middle Hill Road is now, but it was at ground level. Over there you had the street of Broadmarsh, which came off it, and on this side you had Narrow Marsh. Now, Narrow Marsh, unlike Broadmarsh, its name was changed intermittently with the name of Red Lion Street. So for the benefit of the video, just to save any confusion, we will be calling this street Red Lion Street.
Narrow Marsh was on this site for centuries, sitting just north of the River Leen, hence the reason why this end of Canal Street used to be called Leen Side. The fact that this area was called the Marsh gives you the idea of the quality of the land these houses were built on.
In the 1800s, during the Industrial Revolution, Nottingham boomed as a hive of industry of, among other things, of bridals, of tanners, and of lace. In particular, the latter, as a lot of lace factories sprang up on the top of the cliff in the area known as the Lace Market. But of course, a lot of that work also went on down here in the houses of Narrow Marsh, as it did in houses all over Nottingham. Because if you remember, the lace making industry was initially a cottage industry, and a lot of the houses had the telltale framework knitters windows, which were designed to let in as much light as possible. It was during this time that a lot of people moved to the bigger towns and cities to try and find work, and accommodation had to be made for this massive influx of new residents. Houses were crammed into every available space. Every yard, every court, every alley contained houses, and every house contained a lot of people.
Up to 100 people could be living in a court of just 10 houses, sharing just two toilets, which weren't even the flush type we have these days. So you can only imagine what condition they were like. The smell.
And the only running water was from a communal tap in the yard, which was also shared by the 100 people. Baths were a rarity and never a luxury, as they had to be shared by the whole family. Fathers and sons had to go first, followed by mothers and daughters in order of age, with the baby going last. Hence the term, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, as you can imagine how dirty the water might have been by then. Red Lion Street, after the 1890s, was only accessible from the streets of Broadmarsh and Middlemarsh via a passageway under the huge viaducts that had been built. The viaducts served the Great Central Railway, which went south that way, and the Great Northern Railway, which curved round and cut straight through the middle of Narrow Marsh as it continued its journey eastwards towards Sneinton and Colwick. The first streets off Red Lion Street were Malt Mill Lane, which was here, and Popham Street, which was here. They were mainly residential streets with lodging houses and the odd shop. Unlike the majority of the streets and yards off Narrow Marsh, both Malt Mill Lane and Popham Street had roadways and pavements, and Malt Mill Lane linked to Plum Street and Currant Street on Broadmarsh via a passageway underneath the viaduct. After the slum clearance, some of the roadways and some of the buildings of Popham Street and Malt Mill Lane survived until the demolition of the rest of the GNR viaduct. And then both Malt Mill Lane and Popham Street lay bare for a number of years before sadly being built over by the new college.
On the other side of Red Lion Street, opposite Malt Mill Lane, was the Woodman pub. But sadly, not many photos were taken of the Woodman pub. But fortunately, the pub building is one of the few Narrow Marsh buildings that survived the clearance, and here it is today being used as private apartments.
Up here we find the first of 4 quite strange arches which would have served some purpose in the early 1800s. A photo taken during the slum clearance shows the first arch and second arch as having some sort of coving over them, with a cave entrance inside the first arch, neither of which are visible today. Under the fourth arch there would have been a timber dwelling which would have been in front of another sandstone cave, and Mary Collins' grocer's shop was in front of this timber dwelling, and the grocer's shop was one of the last businesses to close on Narrow Marsh, as it was still open selling its wares during the demolition, and would have been open to serve customers in the middle of what would have been a demolition site. Now, further along Red Lion Street, it's quite hard to see through the trees, but we find the 1833 extension to the county jail, which originally intended to use the sandstone caves inside the cliff for extra cells. However, when they started looking into it, they found that all the cave space had been used by the residents of Red Lion Street for extra storage and rooms. So they had to try and find a way of extending their jail around the cave so that they didn't impinge on the occupants below. As you can see, the 1833 brickwork that was put up when the county jail was extended is still visible today. The site below the 1833 brickwork was occupied by number 29 Red Lion Street, which had been a single-storey mission room. At number 31, we had the Red Lion Inn pub, and at the back there you can see a small archway there which contained a small opening, which I'm guessing would have been a barrel store. The Red Lion Inn pub was opposite the very first of the Narrow Marsh rat runs, which was Lee's Yard. And there's 2 important facts to remember about Lee's Yard. The first one being that Lee's Yard was one of the very few of the yards to survive the slum clearance, at least in name anyway, until the demolition of the G&R viaduct part that crossed Canal Street. By the time the G&R viaduct was demolished, it was just wasteland. But in the 1960s, there had been a business, I think it was a blacksmith's, on there, and the area was still classed as Lee's Yard. The second important thing to note is that Rancliffe Street, which is the brand new street that was created when the new college was put here, actually follows the exact pattern of Lee's Yard on the map. So now you know.
How fascinating is all this history of Narrow Marsh? There is so much to tell you, but this is all we've got time for today, so please come back for part 2.